Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am here with my guest, Dr. Hussain, who is a naturopathic doctor, and she specializes in women's health. And she's going to chat with us today about a whole bunch of different topics. So, welcome, Anne. It's so nice to have you here. Can you tell us
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do, who you treat, and what you like to, or who you like to work with?
So as Daina mentioned, I'm a naturopathic doctor. I practice in Aurora, Ontario, and I have a women's health focused practice, specifically really passionate about menstrual literacy, so period literacy. I talk a lot about periods and fertility. I personally have had lots of troubles with my period in the past. I had something called polycystic ovarian syndrome, PCOS, and it was really hard to get a diagnosis for it. And then I was put on birth control pill for it, and I never really understood my period. And I think that was a big part of my whole journey, just not understanding. And the hundreds upon hundreds of women who have sat across from me echo this sentiment that they don't learn enough about their period. So that's kind of led to me focusing on this area.
Awesome. And I've also had some health issues myself around PCOS too. So I totally love and appreciate everything that you do. And I just wanted to share all your knowledge with everyone else. I know, especially right now, a lot of people have been more stressed out than usual, and people's cycles are kind of not their normal, and they might be feeling some more PMS symptoms, and maybe their cycles are more irregular than usual. What have you been seeing the most?
Yeah, definitely a lot of women contacting me because their cycles are different than they normally are. I'm seeing that in patients. I'm also seeing that in people just reaching out based on stuff that I've been posting. I did a post on PMS being worse recently, like when COVID-19, the physical isolation started. And a lot of women responded to that. They're like, oh my gosh, that's totally me. Like more anxious, more irritable, more breast tenderness, more bloating. So an exacerbation of PMS symptoms is definitely something I'm seeing, and also more painful periods and maybe slight irregularities, so slightly delayed periods. And the mechanism of action is actually quite similar for all of those things, with the rug being pulled from under our feet in terms of like our regular infrastructure and routine. Anxiety has been higher, sleep has been a little bit different, screen time has been a little bit higher, eating patterns are completely different, movement has been different. So all of those have an impact on our hormones and ultimately then our cycle. And not just our sex hormones, but also our stress hormone like cortisol. And that's basically what I've been hearing from more and more women, and myself too. Like I've definitely seen more acne in my skin, and that's partially because, sleeping has been slightly off, which means that appetite the next day is also slightly off, which means, there's more chocolate or other foods that have been going in more than usual. I'm trying to get out more, but sometimes, that the laziness kicks in, there's that. And then the mood has been big for people too, right? And emotional eating is definitely a big factor for a lot of us, myself included, especially in that premenstrual phase when our metabolism slightly increases. So when our metabolism slightly increases, our appetite slightly increases, and oftentimes we put in more food than our metabolism accommodates for. So that can create some blood sugar issues, especially in someone like me with a history of PCOS, or maybe you. And then also for people who may be slightly inflamed. So all of those things are impacting cycles 100%.
Absolutely. I agree. I've been eating a lot more sugar than I normally do. So that's not been good.
Yeah, me too. And it's funny because like part of me is like, okay, you know what, these are weird times, just like it's okay. But at the same time, my body is giving me these signals where it's like, maybe it's not so okay. So it's hard to kind of balance those two pieces out. And some days are great, but other days are not so great.
Yeah, absolutely. We all need to maybe increase our self-care a little bit.
For sure.
Yeah. And you talk a lot about self-care as well. Do you use that for working with women who are feeling a lot more stressed out? How do you incorporate self-care into your practice as well as other people?
Yeah, self-care is just, it's a non-negotiable for me and it should be for everyone, because that's how we refill our cups. That's how we actually feel more like ourselves, so we can do the work that we want to do and show up the way that we want to show up. And I teach a lot of women changing their self-care, how to change their self-care throughout their cycle, because each phase of our cycle brings a different kind of energy, right? So if we adapt our lifestyle a little bit more to that, then we can live a little bit more in harmony with our changing hormones. So for example, at the beginning of this, so day one of your cycle conventionally is day one of your period, and that's typically when some women are feeling a little bit low, especially if you have an iron deficiency, or if you maybe have heavy flow and that sort of thing. Like, I have a genetic form of anemia, so I always feel a little bit more tired on day 1 and 2, and then it starts getting better after that. So I take it easy on those days. So self-care looks like, plopping on the couch with a book, or maybe watching a little bit more Netflix, and stuff like that. And then as day 3 and 4 arrive, and, it's the spring of the cycle, of the menstrual cycle, when, things are shifting, energy is picking up a little bit, that's when I start doing a little bit more work. And it's also when I start doing a little bit more exercise. So exercise, like different kind of movement, becomes self-care. And then around ovulation time, so middle of the cycle, that's when, again, energy is typically higher. It might dip a little bit right at ovulation, because ovulation is an event that requires energy. So some women experience a little bit of a dip when you ovulate, which is just, a day or half a day. And then, but around that, it's the summer of your cycle. So that's when a lot of people have momentum and motivation and energy. So that's a great time to kick exercise up a notch, do things that are a little bit more active when it comes to self-care, maybe communicating a lot more with people, getting in touch with friends, hosting, like a virtual dance party, something like that might be a good form of self-care. And then as we move into the fall of the cycle, which is a premenstrual kind of phase where a lot of women may be symptomatic, that's when you start taking it down a notch again. So maybe that looks like a bath, maybe that looks like drinking tea. I love drinking tea. My exercise regimen premenstrually, typically, for like leading into day, like 4 days before my cycle, it's up. And then as I hit 4 days before my cycle, that's usually when my energy dips. Then I start doing more walking and stretching and stuff like that. So yeah, self-care, ultimately you do what works best for you, whatever refills your cup. Don't look at other people and see what works for them, although you can get inspiration from them. But it's creating your own kind of reference guide. That's also something that I love doing, is creating a reference guide for self-care. So brainstorming all the things that refill you and bring you joy and peace and pleasure. And creating things that you could do on a daily basis, things that you could do on a weekly basis, monthly basis, and like a long-term basis. Because then sometimes, especially if you're in a funk, or if you're in your head a lot, it's hard to actually think of things that bring you pleasure or joy, right? Like, and it's nice to have something you can access quickly to draw inspiration from. And it could be like 30 seconds, right? It doesn't have to, it could be long and drawn out, like it could be a 30-minute bath. But sometimes it's just like putting on a 30-second meditation, or it could be just doing, like, pressing an acupressure point, or doing a breathing exercise that you learned, or opening the door and standing at your door and doing nothing else. Like, it could really be anything. But it makes a huge difference in all aspects of your life, because we're so used to being in our go, go, go mode, right? And self-care shifts us automatically and really quickly into that parasympathetic state where our nervous system can relax, our muscles can relax, our digestion works a little bit better. We get out of here and get more into like our bodies.
I love that. And I think that everyone should do this. Make that list that you talked about of all the things that bring you joy. So a little bit of homework for all of you guys.
Yeah, I
Self-care
really,
that works for
really
you.
love doing that. Yeah, I've done it with a lot of patients. I've done it in a couple of workshops, and everyone loves that exercise because then again, it's just easily accessible. And we all have so many things going on in our lives that it's just easy, like, and mindless. Like, the more mindlessly we can, even mindfulness, like getting to that mindful state, sometimes we just need a mindless activity to get there.
That's so true. Yeah. And even if that looks like Netflix, that's okay. Oh.
Yeah, why not?
All right. So I love how you were talking about how you change up the activities that you're doing depending on the phase of your cycle that you are in. So do you do the same kind of thing with the types of foods that you eat? Can you talk a little bit more about that, if that's helpful for people, if it's something that we should all be doing?
Yeah, so I base a lot of my life on my menstrual cycle, to be honest. And as should like all women, in my opinion, if you're a cycling woman, because we grow up and we are raised in this culture and society where we model everything off a male system, right? Like, where it's day in and day out is very similar. Morning testosterone and cortisol go up, and then they wane throughout the day, and then rinse and repeat the next day. Whereas women, yeah, we have this daily cycle where cortisol goes up and then it wanes throughout the day. But then we also have this overarching cycle where our hormones are changing constantly, and these hormonal changes will affect your mood, they'll affect your energy, they'll affect your metabolism and digestion and all of those sorts of things. It's not like it's going to be super erratic. If it is super erratic for you, please get some support with that. But if it's, small fluctuations in your day to day are actually quite normal. So like I was saying, the menstrual cycle, I kind of think of it like the seasons, where winter is your period time, and then leading up to ovulation is spring, then it's summertime around ovulation, and then it's fall as we finish that cycle and move into the next cycle again. So food wise, typically, like, I focus a lot on very nourishing foods during my period, like blood building, from a Chinese medicine perspective, blood building foods. So those are foods that are warm because we're losing a little bit of blood, that have adequate protein in them so that we can build blood, and then iron rich foods. So that could be dark leafy greens, that could be purple and red fruits and vegetables. That could be nettle leaf tea. That's one of my favorites. It could be like mushroom dense food. I personally am plant-based, so my food choices revolve around, plants. But if you are someone who does consume animal products, that could, mean eating maybe a little bit more red meat around that time to get that extra iron. So yeah, that's kind of what it looks like at that time. You have more flexibility and your digestion can handle a little bit more in the follicular phase. So like in springtime, like lighter foods might be something that you can handle easily, like salads and stuff like that. And then as we enter the second half of the cycle, that's where we want to really focus on more anti-inflammatory foods. Like, we should always focus on anti-inflammatory foods, but like that time especially, because of the hormonal fluctuations in that second half of the cycle. The more like fibrous foods, more dense, nutrient dense foods, like your leafy greens and your broccoli and cabbage and cruciferous vegetables, they can help regulate your hormones a little bit better. And that second half of the cycle is also when a lot of women tend to be a little bit more constipated. So making sure lots of fiber is going in, because that's the way that your body eliminates hormone metabolites. So other than that, I would say in general, throughout the cycle, one of the things that I see for most of my patients is that there's not enough protein and there's not enough like healthy fats in their diet. Carbs are easy to get, and there's no deficiency of carbs ever, but the healthy fats and protein intake oftentimes is a big challenge for women, whether they are plant-based or not plant-based. And you need adequate healthy fats because your hormones are fat-based, and plus like your body needs that. And then same thing with protein, like all the repair that happens, all your enzymes, they're all protein based, so you need that to be there in order to function optimally. And then the antioxidants and the minerals and the vitamins, those go without saying, you need them always.
Well, yeah, I love getting more healthy fats in my diet. I'm obsessed with avocados. So lately that's been my healthy fats. Are there any favorites that you have?
I'm a big fan of pumpkin seeds and black sesame seeds. They have, they're higher in zinc and iron, which are two minerals that all of us need for a variety of different reasons, especially hormonal health. And I also find them, because they're like very mild tasting, they're easy to put into everything. So like black sesame seeds, if I make a stir fry, black sesame seeds. If I make a smoothie, black sesame seeds. They don't really taste like anything, but they're super nutritious, especially from a Chinese medicine perspective. They're very blood building. So black sesame seeds are a big one for me. What else do I like? I like flax for women who can tolerate it. Some women can't tolerate it, but it's a great one to bind excess estrogen metabolites. I love avocados. I make a very good chocolate avocado pudding. I love chocolate. So chocolate avocado pudding is one of my favorite things to make. And it's a fan favorite for my patients, one of my recipes. What else do I like? Omega-3s, especially for women who have difficulty resolving inflammatory processes in their body, because we need omega-3s to at the end stage of like an inflammatory process. So omega-3s can be helpful, especially if there's like menstrual pain as well. So those are the ones that I would lean toward personally, but that's a personal preference too, partially.
I think I need to load up on some black sesame seeds. It sounds like a really
Yeah.
easy addition to foods. So yeah, I'm gonna try
Yeah.
that one. All right, let's
Yeah.
talk a little bit about our periods themselves. So like what are people supposed to be looking for as maybe a normal cycle? Because I know a lot of people don't really know what normal is. So maybe you could shed some light on that topic.
Yeah. And you're right, a lot of women don't know, and it's not really their fault. It's like our education system has failed us, our society has failed us partially, and it's not knowledge that's taught appropriately. I always joke about how we learn more about calculating the hypotenuse of a triangle than we do about our own bodies, which is completely true.
It is.
Like, like no one ever forgets a squared plus b squared equals c squared, but like, talk about like estrogen, progesterone. No one learns about that. So I'll go through phase by phase because that's the easiest way to do it. So when we were talking about our menstrual cycle, again, during your period, that's when your uterine lining that built up in your last cycle is shedding. That's typically where you might get a little bit of pressure or discomfort in your lower abdomen and your pelvic pubic area. And that's normal. If you're getting like debilitating pain, if you're taking like a lot of painkillers or missing a day of work or feeling super nauseated, have radiating pain, or just like feel like you can't move, like that's not normal, even though you might have normalized it for yourself. I get a lot of women who are like, yeah, I just, I just skip a day of work when my period comes, and that's kind of normal for them now. That's not normal. Other things to look out for is the actual quality of flow and quantity of flow. So how long is it lasting? How many hygiene products are you going through, or how much are you filling your cup? Are there clots in there? Like small, tiny clots every now and again are fine. But if you're getting like large clots or just only clots or a lot of clots, that's actually not normal, because your body actually balances out the how it's breaking down the clots. Your body's producing compounds that break down those clots. So there's a mismatch between how much you're producing and how much your body's able to handle. So we want to definitely get a handle on that. And then we want to see, as we move forward, how are you feeling? So typically most women will feel most like themselves day 3 or 4 of their cycle. So 3 or 4 days after your period starts, that's when most women are like, okay, I feel like myself. I have a little bit of momentum and energy. Again, we're entering that spring of your cycle. So that's the time where hormones are rising. So your luteinizing hormone, your follicle stimulating hormone is rising, and then your estrogen and testosterone go up as well. So a lot of women are like, okay, now I can do things. And that's a great time to actually get started on things. So like if if you have something that you're planning to do, that's a great time to start planning it all out and executing on those things. And then we move toward ovulation, and ovulation is this event where, you know, your egg is being released so that it may be fertilized. And that happens after a surge of luteinizing hormone. And at that time, some women get what we call middle schmerz, which is this sharp pain on your side, on the side of your abdomen. That can be normal. I usually don't concern myself with that unless it's like debilitating pain and it's lasting. Like that's not something we want, but like sharp pangs for a tiny bit, that's fine. And then cervical mucus at that time usually is like that more fluidy, egg whitey type to facilitate, you know, sperm if it's there to get closer to the egg. And then that's also when women tend to feel a little bit more confident. They tend to feel a little bit more, you know, sexy, like they can do things, well, you know, and that's a great time to schedule a lot of things where you want to convince someone or you want to, you know, have important conversations or meetings or ask for something. Like that's a great time to utilize some of that energy. And that's around that time. And then typically women will feel good and like themselves and motivated and energetic for a little while after their period as well. And then as hormones, because estrogen and progesterone have gone up, but then as those hormones wane down, that's typically when a lot of premenstrual symptoms will come up. They might come up earlier depending on what the levels of those estrogen and progesterone levels are, because estrogen, progesterone, they're not just like good or bad, or, you know, good or evil. They have this kind of complex interplay that happens. So we want to, like, if we are getting symptoms earlier, we want to see what those levels are at. And that's typically why day 21 testing we do for estrogen and progesterone to see what their levels are in relation to one another. Because someone could have high estrogen and low progesterone, or someone could have normal estrogen but low progesterone, or they could have like low both. There's a lot of possibilities there that could be contributing to a variety of different symptoms. And as we're leading into the premenstrual week, like I would say normal is like maybe slight fluctuations in energy. So maybe you're slightly more tired. Maybe you're getting, maybe your appetite is a little bit higher up because your metabolism is also a little bit higher. Maybe you're getting a little bit of mood changes. Like a little bit is fine, but nothing erratic and nothing too severe. So like if you're having, you know, mood swings where, you know, you're biting your partner's head off or you're biting your kid's head off because they ate a cookie, like that's not normal. If you're really bloated, that's not normal. Although slight water retention is totally fine. So we want to always be tracking the severity of any symptoms that you might be getting. So that's kind of what normal looks like. And then we get back into your period again and the cycle starts anew. When I'm talking to most women, I honestly like will start, like a lot of women track, and the great thing about this day and age is there's so many apps to start tracking things. However, there's a lot of things that can change over the span of a cycle that are impacted by hormones. So that includes sleep, allergies, energy, motivation, libido, and sex drive, and anything you can really think of. So all of those changes are things that we should all be tracking over the span of our cycle. And not just one cycle, we want to track it over a few different cycles to start identifying patterns, because I get women who are like, some weeks my sleep is totally off and some weeks it's great. And then we track it, and then premenstrually their sleep is off, and then once their period starts, their sleep is great. Or they'll come in and they'll say, my skin is, I don't know, I feel like I break out all the time. And then we'll start digging in, and then they're breaking out at ovulation time and then right before their period. Like we can start actually getting into the nitty gritty of what's happening in your body once we start tracking appropriately, which is why I'm a big proponent of tracking. And starting with your biggest pain point is a great way to start. So like if you're suffering from skin issues, and start tracking those throughout your whole cycle. If you're having sleep issues, same thing, track them throughout your whole cycle. If you're having mood issues, track them throughout your whole cycle, and maybe give it, like scale it, like out of 10, this is the severity of the symptom, or take pictures if it's something more visible. Yeah, so that's kind of what a normal picture can look like, some of the variations that women oftentimes experience, and then how to really start digging into what's actually happening. Because when you track your cycle, then you can A, start identifying your own patterns, and B, then you can take it to a healthcare provider who can piece things together with you with so much more efficiency and effectiveness.
Absolutely. I actually love tracking myself and I've been doing it for a few years. I know there's quite a few apps out there that you can use to track and it's helpful. And even things like pain, I notice a lot of women I see in practice, their back pain gets a lot worse, like either premenstrually or while they're on their period as well. So it's good for tracking for probably so many more reasons outside of your period. What are some
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what are some apps or like if there's any in particular that you really like or that you recommend?
Yeah. I I'm old school. I do paper and pen. Well, especially like if I'm like tracking because especially if like things have changed and I'm now trying to reestablish like what's happening in my body, because the thing is that we also age and we change. If you've had a baby, for example, if you're postpartum or maybe you're in your 40s and things are changing, those are times to reevaluate. So you can do that. Some women, even to start off with, I'm like, if you don't want to do an app, just write it in your calendars. Just start somewhere. But there's so many. It's a personal preference. There's Clue app, there's Kandara, there's Flow, there's Period Tracker. You just have to find one that works for you. And what you're looking for. If you're looking for something more fertility based, then maybe some one that has like basal body temperature and all those things as well. Although for me, like honestly, I just get everyone to track all of those things anyway, because then we can get a good idea of when you're ovulating and all of those other things as well. But you can start however you want. I'm like I said, I'm old school and I'll just write it out.
That's good. That works too.
Yeah. Is there one that you use personally?
I think mine's called Period Tracker.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've used that one before.
Yeah, it's got pretty much everything in it. And I even track all my like supplements and everything. Like it's got so many extra things and yeah, I like it. It's good. It's convenient and it also
Yeah,
reminds
and actually,
me.
like speaking, go ahead. Sorry,
That's
there's a bit of
okay.
a lag.
Yeah. It sometimes even reminds me of like when I'm about to start my period. So sometimes I have PMS symptoms that tell me when it's coming, but sometimes I don't. And it's just like it's nice to have that reminder sometimes because we just don't remember.
So true, right? Like sometimes we like overreact to something, and then we're like, oh, okay. Then you get that reminder, and it's like, oh, right, that's why. Let's be kinder to myself because there are changes happening in here, and maybe let's treat my body a little bit differently. But going back to the pain aspect that you were mentioning, pain is a big one that's been coming up recently as well, like more premenstrually and with the period, and a lot of that goes back to just the changes that are happening in the body, and it manifesting as pain. Like for myself, like the last 2 periods, I typically, thankfully, don't get a lot of pain with my periods, but I've been getting joint pain the last 2 cycles before my period, and I think a lot of that has to do with the sleep changes, the diet changes, the other changes that we talked about at the beginning. But tracking it, like any symptom, regardless, even if you're not a woman or if you're menopausal now, like track your symptoms, because that's the best way to advocate for yourself. That's how I got my diagnosis eventually, because I was tracking my cycle like no tomorrow. I'm like, I'm gonna take this information to my doctor and get a diagnosis because enough is enough. And one of the like undoubtedly one of the one of the pieces of homework that pretty much all my patients get is tracking their symptoms in one way or another. And again, like an app is a great way to do that if that's your tool of choice, but writing it down is also helpful. Like you can honestly do it however you want.
So many awesome tips. I have one last question, and this is a little bit more because I'm curious myself, but I know that there's so many different types of products out there. Like there's the cup, and then there's like even like just organic versions of pads and tampons, and so many different types of newer things, like the cloth ones that are becoming more and more popular just because we're causing so much waste with all these plastic products. Are there any that you find that are either helpful with like reducing toxic levels or just that work with a lot of women, or anything that you recommend in general?
Yeah. So sometimes it's a matter of preference, like what works. It also depends on the kind of flow that you have. I know there are some religious aspects to it as well that come into play, where insertion of like a cup, for example, is not really looked highly upon. So there's all these different components to it, from an environmentally sustainable perspective, and my own perspective, and reducing a toxic burden. I like a cup. It's effective. It's clean. It gets it takes time getting used to, but it's totally worth it in my opinion, especially like when we're looking at how much hygiene products we use on a regular basis. Um, Other than that, like the organic cotton tampons and pads are definitely better than some of the commercial brands, that have been around for a very long time. And there's been lots of studies on that too. But ultimately, it's you do the best that you can. I like the idea of the cloth ones too. I've been thinking of trying one. I like trying things out. I like the idea of that as well. If for someone who doesn't want to use a cup, like that's actually a great option because it's very similar to like a normal pad that you use, but you just reuse it. I think part of the problem right now is that we've been so accustomed to using disposable products, right? So it takes time and it takes effort to start shifting some of those habits. And habits, as we all know, they are hard to change. And combine that with the dialogue we've had around periods, which is they're dirty, they're not not pure, or whatever it is that we grow up with. I think it's created a bit of an impediment in terms of changing some of the practices that we have. But like in the recent years, I would say there's been lots of good period positive language that's coming out, a lot of awareness that's coming out as well. So hopefully that will change. But I would say as eco-friendly as you can get, that would be great.
Awesome. All right. Well, I don't think I have any more questions to ask you. Is there anything else that you want to add in?
Track your cycles. I'm not adding that in. I'm just like reiterating that point. Track your cycles, track your symptoms. That's the best way that you can help yourself, and someone else can help you as well. Other than that, if you are interested in learning more about how to improve your PMS symptoms, I do have a PMS manual available to everyone for free. It's at annhussain.com/PMS. And has some great research, like evidence-based tips on how to, like what kinds of things make PMS worse, and then what kinds of things make PMS better.
Awesome. I'll be sure to leave the link for you guys to download that, and I will be grabbing that myself. Can we send everyone to one of your social media channels? Where do you like to hang out the most?
Yeah, I hang out on Instagram a lot, although recently I've been hanging out less. We all have those periods where we, are a little bit more active, a little bit less active. So my Instagram is dr.annhussain. And then I also have a Facebook community that people can join in. I post some interviews. I have one with Daina on there on back pain. It's called Go With The Flow.
Awesome. And I will make sure to leave all the links for you guys below. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you learned lots of things. Definitely follow Anne. She's got so much good information, everything about periods. If you have any more questions, reach out to her directly. And yeah, thank you so much for being here, Anne. This was so much fun. We should do it again.
Thanks, Daina. Yes, we should do it again.
All right. Bye, everyone, and take care.